I felt the push before I heard the laughter. "Let's see if you still got it, Grandma." Kyle's voice rang out sharp and smug, followed by the cold, calculated shove between my shoulder blades. 1 second, I was standing on the dock with a lemonade in hand, watching the sun glint off the lake. The next, I was airborne, arms flailing, glass flying, and then the water swallowed me whole. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't some roughhousing prank that went too far. It was a deliberate, cruel act from a boy I had once rocked to sleep during thunderstorm nights, whispering lullabies into his ear while he clutched my finger like it was the only safe thing left in the world. The water was colder than I expected for late spring. My chest cinched up immediately. The shock stole my breath. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, couldn't remember the last time I swam. Not since my rotator cuff surgery 6 years ago. The doctor said, "No swimming. Too risky." But none of that mattered now. Because as I flailed to the surface, sputtering lake water and desperate for air, I looked toward the dock, and no one moved. Kyle stood there, his tall frame blocking the sun, arms folded, that same detached smirk plastered across his face. His friends cackled behind him, some recording on their phones. And then I saw my son, Daniel, leaning lazily against the railing, sipping his beer like it was just another lazy Saturday. His wife, Paula, stood beside him, wine glass in hand, sunglasses covering eyes that didn't bother to look at me. "She's being dramatic," Paula muttered. I don't even remember how I got out. I think instinct took over, panic, or maybe the leftover grit no one realized I still had. My knees were scraped from where I pulled myself across the gravel. My hands were shaking. My cardigan was soaked through. Not one of them helped me. No towel. No question of, "Are you okay?" Not even a goddamn nod of acknowledgement. Kyle looked down at me as I panted on the dock, coughing up water and pride. "Guess you still float. Tough old bird." Laughter again, but this time it didn't sting. It ignited. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I stood slowly, the wet fabric clinging to my skin like shame, and walked back toward the picnic table where they were already uncorking a second bottle of wine. They went back to grilling burgers. I sat down, dripping, alone. It was then, right then, that I realized I wasn't the family matriarch. I was the entertainment. Earlier that morning, I had made lemon bars from scratch, Kyle's favorite. He hadn't said thank you. He used to say I was the best part of this house. I used to believe him. "You all right?" Dolores had asked me a week before, her tone pointed as always. "People show you who they are when they think you need them." I hadn't understood it then. I did now. I excused myself quietly and went inside the house. My house. The same one I had let them live in rent-free for 2 summers when Daniel was between jobs. I dried myself with a guest towel no one else used, changed into dry clothes, and stared into the mirror. I looked like a ghost. Hair clinging to my face, knees scuffed, chest rising and falling like a drumline. And still, no one came in to check. Back in the kitchen, they were planning a vacation. Cancun, I think. Paula was scrolling through Airbnb photos while Kyle left wet footprints across my floor. "Maybe we'll take Kyle before he transfers," Daniel said. "Depends if she's still breathing by then," Paula added, chuckling. I sat at the edge of the breakfast table, my hands clenched in my lap. I felt like a trespasser in my own life. Once upon a time, I had read bedtime stories in that very room. Kyle would fall asleep curled up under my arm. Now, he mimicked my flailing to his friends like I was a joke, a meme. I walked into the pantry, pretending to look for sugar. I needed a minute. That's when I heard it. "She's not gonna last much longer," Paula whispered. "She's slowing down," Daniel agreed. "And she keeps forgetting stuff." "She didn't forget anything when she wired you money for that emergency dental surgery," I mumbled under my breath. The kitchen blurred for a moment. My hands gripped the shelving. My knees ached again, but not from the fall, from years, from being a ghost with a bank account. That night, after everyone had left, I sat in my room with the door locked. I opened a drawer and pulled out the binder Cliff and I had assembled after his stroke. Inside was the trust, Kyle's college fund, $50,000. Saved from birthday money, bonuses, tax returns. We skipped vacations to build it. Education first, we said. I placed the binder on the desk and lit the lamp. My journal sat beside it. I flipped to a clean page and wrote one sentence. They will never get the chance to drown me again. If you've ever been ignored or overlooked after giving your all, type 1. You deserve to be seen. The stove was never on. I checked it twice before bed, once after brushing my teeth, and once again before turning off the hallway light. Still, I stood in the living room the next morning, listening through the paper-thin walls as Paula whispered to Daniel. She left the stove on again, she said, voice just loud enough to carry. What if Kyle was here alone? That's dangerous, Dan. She paused dramatically, then added, I don't think she's taking her medication. Medication for what, exactly? Memory? Dementia? Delusion? I stood there holding my coffee mug, letting it cool in my hands. They were building a case. They weren't concerned. They were documenting. Not one of them knew I kept ledgers. Financials balanced to the cent, filed neatly in my sock drawer, password-protected spreadsheets, tax receipts scanned and tagged by year. I had not forgotten anything, but now they were watching me like a liability. It started small. Kyle rolled his eyes when I asked him to carry groceries inside. Paula offered to help balance the checkbook, though I'd never asked. Daniel started pausing conversations when I entered the room. I could feel them mentally labeling folders in their heads. Decline, confusion, justifications. They thought they were planning an intervention. They didn't realize they were handing me all the evidence I'd ever need. The incident at Paula's networking dinner sealed it. I hadn't even planned to attend. It was meant to be a small get-together for her yoga studio staff and a few tech startup investors. Just light food and conversation, she said. Maybe you can make that lemon cake they all like. I made it, out of habit, out of muscle memory. But when I walked into the kitchen later that night, Kyle was in full performance mode on the back patio. So get this, he said, grinning. Grandma falls into the lake, arms everywhere, screaming like a turtle on its back. The group burst out laughing. I stood behind the sliding glass door, out of view, frozen. She kept flailing, Kyle continued, probably trying to guilt trip us for not helping. You know how old people are. They weaponize helplessness. Weaponize. Not struggle, not fear, not even panic. Just a tactic. That's what I had become to them. A strategy to be managed, not a person to be loved. One guest chuckled. That's dark. Kyle shrugged. She's fine. Tough old bird. That phrase again. That stripped-down, dehumanizing label. Then Paula chimed in, soft and polished, like everything she did was calculated to look kind. I told Daniel she's becoming a liability. We need to start thinking about the future. No one disagreed. No one defended me. I left the cake on the kitchen counter, didn't say a word. By the time I got to my room, something had changed. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. The next morning, Dolores showed up like she always did. Through the side door, no knocking, coffee and muffins in hand. You look like hell, she said, placing the bag on the table. Sit, I'll pour. I sat. You've been quiet, she added. Too quiet, which means something happened. I didn't need to say much. One nod. That was enough. Dolores pulled out a manila folder from her oversized handbag. I saved this from last year. You remember, when we did your taxes? You told me about the trust, the accounts, the things Daniel and Paula didn't know about. She slid a business card across the table. Peter Holloway, Estate Law. You kept this? I asked, surprised. I keep everything, she said. Especially when my best friend is being bled dry by leeches in expensive jeans. I smiled. The first real one in days. She leaned in. Listen to me. You paid for Kyle's school. You funded their vacations. You stocked the fridge when they forgot yours was empty. And they repay you by calling you unstable? I don't want revenge, I said quietly. She nodded. Of course not. You want release. That afternoon, I called Peter. He answered on the second ring. Peter Holloway. It's Margaret Walker, I said. I'd like to schedule a meeting. Bring everything you've got, he replied. and don't sugarcoat it. I didn't. I brought the original trust documents. Copies of old bank statements, letters from Kyle's school, a journal entry dated the night of the lake incident. They will never drown me again. Peter was meticulous, silent as he reviewed everything. His eyes scanned each line like a surgeon before an incision. "Still want to keep the fund active?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I want to reallocate it." He raised an eyebrow. "To whom?" I handed him a flyer, creased and coffee-stained, from a scholarship foundation Cliff and I had supported for years. STEM for first-gen women. Peter smiled. "Perfect." Back at home, I started a new game. A stumble here, a slight hesitation in the hallway, a forgotten word mid-sentence, all intentional. Paula began leaving articles about assisted living facilities in plain view. Daniel started speaking to me in slow, overly cheerful tones. Kyle stopped saying hi altogether, just a grunt, a glare. They believed what they wanted to believe. I let them, because the more certain they were that I was slipping, the less they suspected I was slipping away. If you've ever had to act small just to stay safe, type 2. Sometimes pretending is power. One night, I caught Daniel whispering in the kitchen while I stood just outside the hallway light. "She's getting worse," he said. "Maybe we should call a lawyer, start the process, power of attorney or something." Paula replied, "Let's move fast, before she accidentally gives the house to someone else." I smiled in the dark. Too late. The next morning I made them pancakes. Light, fluffy, with cinnamon, Kyle's favorite. They ate, they laughed, they planned their weekend. I poured my tea carefully, let the cup rattle ever so slightly on the saucer. Paula glanced at me and whispered, "She's trembling again." Daniel nodded solemnly. "We should talk tonight." I added a little more honey to my cup, stirred twice, sipped. They were preparing to take control, but I had already taken it back. That evening, I printed a single copy of the updated trust confirmation and folded it neatly into a blank envelope. I placed it in the drawer beside my journal and whispered to the air, "Let's see who still visits when they think the will has changed." The Scholarship Foundation emailed me at 8:16 a.m. The subject line was simple. Confirmation. Contribution processed. Anonymous donor. I stared at the screen in the quiet of my room at Silver Pines, hands steady for the first time in weeks. The air smelled faintly of brewed coffee and lavender detergent. Peace, for once, unearned by anyone else's approval. The number was clear in black font, $50,000, transferred, locked, redirected. Not a cent of it would go to Kyle now. No more piano lessons, no more spring break abroad, no more backup plans paid for by the woman he laughed at while she drowned. I closed the laptop slowly and placed it back on the small desk by the window. Light streamed through the blinds, brushing over the single framed photo I brought with me. Kyle, age 6, in his Halloween astronaut costume, holding a pumpkin bigger than his chest. His smile had been different then, unfiltered, untouched by sarcasm or entitlement. He was still sweet, back then. 3 days earlier, I had taken a train at dawn, suitcase light but full of things that mattered. Cliff's old flannel, my ledgers, and a single-page letter that began, "To those who confused love with access." Peter met me at his office, crisp as always in his navy suit and silver tie clip. "They're going to panic," he said without looking up from the paperwork. "I'm counting on it," I replied. I signed where he pointed. Trust restructured, will updated, power of attorney revoked, digital access cut off, all notices rerouted through his firm. "I've never seen someone this prepared," Peter murmured. "I've had a lifetime to prepare," I said. Back at the house, my former house, the silence must have been confusing. No morning toast, no fresh towels in the laundry basket, no birthday reminders tacked on the fridge. And then, the letter arrived. Peter sent me a transcript. He said Kyle opened it at breakfast, thought it might be a birthday card. Instead, he read my handwriting aloud while his scrambled eggs went cold. "You will receive nothing from me in death because you gave me nothing of value in life." Daniel reportedly stood up mid-bite. Paula dropped her fork. Kyle turned red, then white. They had assumed I was waiting to feel appreciated, waiting to be needed, waiting to die. But I had stopped waiting the day I stopped gasping for air in that lake. The next 48 hours were chaos. Paula called the bank, Denied. Daniel tried to access my medical records. Blocked. Kyle emailed the foundation, pretending to be me. Auto response. This donor account is confidential and sealed. They didn't understand how far I'd already moved on, from their plans, their performances, their polite pretenses. This wasn't abandonment, it was boundary. At Silver Pines, I unpacked a little more each day. A ceramic mug Dolores had given me last Christmas. A recipe book I never got to teach Kyle from. A box of stationery for letters I might send, but not to them. I attended a watercolor class, joined a book club, learned 3 new ways to make tea taste better with age, and every evening I sat on my balcony and watched the sky go quiet. One night, Dolores called. "They reported you missing," she said, chuckling darkly. I laughed too. Well, I did disappear from their narrative. "They're scrambling," she added, words getting around. Kyle dropped out of class. Daniel's trying to cancel appointments to figure things out. Paula's in damage control. "They thought they had time," I said. "They thought they had you," she corrected. "If someone ever assumed you'd stay, no matter how badly they treated you, type 3. We deserve exits, not just endurance." Later that week, Peter arranged a formal meeting with them. He invited them to his office, Daniel in a tight-buttoned shirt, Paula in performative pastels, Kyle in his signature whatever slouch. Peter told me afterward exactly how it unfolded. He greeted them, slid a folder across the table, and said, "This is from Margaret Elizabeth Walker." No small talk, no warning, just the truth. "To those who mistook my silence for consent, I gave until it cost me breath. I will not give until it costs me a grave." Daniel reportedly interrupted. "This is insane. She's not in her right mind." Peter replied without blinking. "She's more lucid than any of you." He read on. "The scholarship fund is gone. The house is no longer yours to inherit. My accounts are sealed. My love has limits, and you reached them." Paula turned red, then pale. Kyle muttered something under his breath. Daniel sat down hard, like the weight finally hit. But what they didn't know, what only Peter and I understood, was that the biggest blow hadn't landed yet. I had left behind more than a restructured will. I'd left a test. Weeks earlier, I had paused my prescriptions. Nothing life-threatening, just enough for them to notice. I let my hands tremble. Let myself forget to write down an appointment. I watched how they responded. Not with compassion, but calculation. "She's slipping," Paula had whispered. "We need to move quickly," Daniel had replied. Their concern was never for me, it was for their claim. So I gave them what they wanted, an elderly woman losing control. Only, I was in complete control. At the end of the letter, Peter read aloud was one final paragraph. "This inheritance was never a gift. It was a mirror. And now I no longer see love in your reflections, only entitlement. That mirror is gone." Peter closed the file. Silence followed. Not reverence, stunned, suffocating silence. They had been handed every opportunity, every privilege, every second chance, and they failed. Because they assumed the money was theirs. They forgot it came from me. That evening, as I finished my tea on the balcony, I opened my journal and drew 2 columns beneath the title, "Who Reached Out with Love, Who Reached Out with a Lawyer." Kyle's name didn't need writing. I already knew where it belonged. If you've ever had to test someone's heart to see the truth, type 3. Sometimes the will doesn't reveal character. The waiting does. The first message arrived at 6:12 a.m., subject line, "Urgent, please call us, Mom." I didn't. The email, forwarded by Peter, was a mess of desperation and half-lies. Daniel wrote it like someone throwing water on a house already burned down. "We didn't know you felt this way." Kyle's distraught. Paula's crying. "Please just talk to us. We're not mad. We're just confused." Confused? They weren't confused when they called me a burden. When Kyle reenacted my drowning like it was a sketch for his friends. When they circled like vultures, whispering about power of attorney over my meals. They were only confused now because the accounts were locked, the money was gone, and I was no longer within reach. I closed the laptop without replying. That silence? It was earned. Back at the house, Paula had started unraveling. Dolores told me her yoga studio had quietly removed her from the website. One of her clients, a woman named Cheryl, was at the dinner where Kyle told the drowning story. Apparently, Cheryl didn't think it was funny. Paula tried to explain it away as a dark family joke. Cheryl didn't buy it, neither did her board. Daniel, meanwhile, had begun canceling meetings at work. Rumor was he was drinking more. A neighbor saw him watering the lawn at midnight, barefoot and muttering. Kyle? He stopped going to class. He tried to apply for a private loan, got denied. Called the foundation directly. They told him the fund was non-reversible, anonymous, already redistributed. He threw his phone at the wall. Dolores heard it from next door. Sounds like a meltdown, she told me with a shrug over the phone. Or karma. Every morning at Silver Pines, I woke up with the sun. I watered the small lavender bush growing outside my window, attended knitting circles, walked the garden paths in Cliff's old flannel. No one asked what I used to be. They only asked how I was today. If you've ever disappeared to protect your peace, type 4. Your silence might just be the loudest boundary you ever set. I hadn't written them again. But I had written something. A letter. This time, not addressed to Kyle or Daniel or Paula. It was to a girl named Jasmine L., recipient of the redirected scholarship. A 17-year-old high school senior, first in her family to go to college. She wanted to study biomedical engineering. Her essay had brought tears to my eyes. Dear Jasmine, I wrote, once, someone told me they wanted to build machines that helped people breathe. I hope you do. Not because he never meant it, but because he forgot what it was like to be kind. I signed it simply. A woman who believes in your future. No return address, no trace, just legacy. Meanwhile, Peter sent me updates in clean bullet points. Inheritance blocked. Real estate redirected to shelter trust. Tax restructuring complete. Final notice sent with legal transcript. He'd given them one last statement. Margaret Walker has removed herself not only from your will but your reach. Any attempt to claim otherwise will be treated as harassment. Simple, legal, brutal in its clarity. And yet they kept trying. Kyle called Peter's office twice in one day, left voicemails that swung between pleading and screaming. She's not thinking clearly. She can't do this to us. We didn't mean it. But they did. They meant all of it, until the consequences arrived. That week, Daniel attempted something bold. He filed a report, again, this time suggesting I had been coerced. That someone got to me. Peter responded with a simple scan of my journal entry, handwritten and dated. They will never get the chance to drown me again. No further response necessary. The final twist came 1 week later. Dolores called, voice tight with restrained laughter. You're going to want to sit for this, she said. I am sitting. Paula just tried to explain everything to her sister at brunch. She told the story like you were the villain. Said you manipulated them. That you were bitter. That you fabricated the drowning incident. I waited. Dolores let the silence hang like a curtain. And? I finally asked. And Cheryl, remember the guest? Looked her dead in the eye and said, no one fakes drowning with that kind of silence. Then she got up and left. They were unraveling, not because I destroyed them, but because I removed myself, and they had built their lives like I was a permanent pillar. Now the foundation was gone, and everything cracked. That Sunday I stood on my balcony, tea in hand, watching two sparrows bicker over the same feeder. Peace isn't always quiet. Sometimes it's just knowing they can no longer reach you. I didn't need to burn bridges. I simply walked across them and pulled up the planks behind me. In my journal, I wrote my final note beneath the column that once tracked who noticed and who didn't. I wasn't waiting for their regret. I was waiting for mine to fade, and now it has. If they ever find their way here, if they ever dare show up pretending love, I'll offer tea, but not access. And I'll say, it's nice to see you, but I left that version of me back at the lake. If you've ever chosen peace over pretending, type 4. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom.